Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Aretha. In this video, I'd like to discuss a few of the reasons why we may be overcommitting ourselves. And I'd like to pair this discussion with a high-level mid-year review of my own goals. We've all heard the advice that we should say no to things we don't want to do. But does this mean that we should say yes to everything we find remotely interesting? I'll give you a hint, the answer is no, because if you say yes to everything, you'll end up overcommitting yourself. And that's kind of what I uncovered when I did my 6-month review for the first half of 2023. See, back in December 2022, I was in a very different situation. My family and I were settling down from a whole bunch of changes that had happened over a relatively short period of time. In November 2021, I started a brand new job. About midway through 2022, we moved into a bigger house. We had to renovate the house. We renovated our old house. We put our old house on the rental market. There were a lot of shifts happening in our physical space. I was also wrapping up a series of pretty intense treatments for Crohn's disease, and I was finally getting into remission. So I think at the end of 2022, I just wanted some peace. And so I set my goals for 2023 to be focused on well-being and health in general. I was already doing kickboxing 3 times a week, and I thought I should add strength training to that. To balance out some of the intensive stuff I was doing, I thought I needed to add some kind of yoga or stretching or something to balance out all the jarring and pretty strenuous exercise I was doing. I also had some goals around traveling and relaxation and to really be present in this stage of my life, raising my daughter and things like that. So my goals for 2023 were all focused on enjoying myself, enjoying our new house, settling into my job a little bit better, and focusing on my well-being and my health. In January, I added strength training to my routine. That has been going really well, and I've been really enjoying the benefits of doing that. I feel stronger. I feel like I'm taking care of myself better because I've added this. But the one thing I haven't added yet is the stretching component that would balance out all the hard exercising that I'm doing. But after a couple of months of taking it easy and feeling a little bit better, I started itching for more. I decided that I really wanted to explore creative outlets for myself. I thought about maybe starting a YouTube channel because I already spent a lot of time on YouTube and I really enjoyed that medium. But then I also thought about starting a blog. And then in a moment of either courage or insanity, I decided to do both. So I launched a blog and I started a YouTube channel at the same time around February of this year. But when I did that, I never went back and revisited or adjusted my goals from December. I just thought, I could write 1 article a week and I can post 1 short video a week and I should keep both projects going and it should be fairly easy. So I slowly started adding more things without looking at the big picture and subtracting anything else. In project management, this is referred to as scope creep. Scope creep is basically what happens when you keep adding new features and new requirements to a previously predefined and agreed upon project. Scope creep is notorious for derailing projects and leading to their failure. But in my personal life, what happens is that as I keep adding new things to my plate, it's slowly displacing other things, whether I realize it or not. I did a whole video about systems thinking and how we operate as complex systems, and how any changes to one component of the system affects other components. Well, I knew that intellectually, but still, I slowly started overcommitting myself. So let's see if you have been falling into the same patterns as I have. The first thing that can lead us to overcommit to things is that we confuse our capabilities with our capacity. Just because we have the skills to do something doesn't mean that we have the capacity or the bandwidth to actually fit those into our lives. And this is something simple that trips me up all the time. If someone said, hey, can you come help me clean out my basement? I definitely have the capabilities to do that. I know how to clean. But do I have the capacity to give them 4 hours of my time on a Saturday afternoon? Probably not. So when someone asks you to do something, or when you consider adding something to your own plate, don't just look at whether you have the skill set or the ability to perform the task. Look at whether you have the capacity, both in terms of time and energy, to take on this additional load, especially if this is not a one-time thing. If you're committing to doing something every week, you have to really look at how other things in your week have to shift to make room for that, so you have enough time and energy to do it. That was my number 1 error. I thought I can write a blog post in the evenings after my daughter goes to bed. And I completely overlooked the fact that in the evenings, I am usually tired and burnt out from a whole day of working and doing cognitive work. So in the evenings, I just didn't have the mental capacity to handle creative writing the way I wanted it to be done. Just because I had an hour or two in the evening didn't mean that I could use that time to write effectively. So while I planned for the time capacity, I did not plan for the energy capacity, and I just didn't have it. Now, am I capable of writing an article a week? Absolutely. I just didn't have the capacity based on how I planned to get it done. Another trap you might be falling into that's closely related is that when you think of new things to do, you plan them in a vacuum. This happened to me with my exercise schedule. I mentioned that I was already kickboxing 3 days a week, and I was doing it between 5 and 5:45 p.m. on my way to go pick up my daughter. So my workout place had to be strategically located right next to her daycare and not too far from our house, so I could get there in time, get my workout done, and pick her up by 6 p.m. And since I was already able to do that 3 days a week, I thought, why not do it 5 days a week? After all, I had a routine that worked, and if I just tightened up my schedule a little bit, I could do it 5 days a week. But the one thing I ignored there is that the reason I was able to consistently work out 3 days a week was because I had 5 work days to pick from. That means I had 2 days as a buffer. So if a Monday was a little bit too busy and I couldn't get to my kickboxing workout, I could always go on Tuesday, right? So any single day could not make me fail my whole week because I had 4 more days to figure out how to fit in 3 workouts. But now that I decided to work out every weekday, I basically didn't have a buffer. And what this created was the pressure for me to be perfect. So I could not have a day where I ran late or I took a late meeting or anything like that. Everything had to be just so in order for me to not fail. And the perfectionist in me went into overdrive. So my options were success or failure. There was no in between. Either I worked out 3 days a week doing kickboxing and 2 days doing strength training, or I failed my whole week. And we all know that this all or nothing thinking is a little bit dangerous. So when I committed to adding strength training, I completely disregarded the need to have some breathing room, a little bit of a buffer in case my week didn't go exactly as planned. So I haven't quite figured it out perfectly just yet, but I have settled into a little bit of a different routine. So my goal is now to go strength training twice a week and kickboxing twice a week. I think having at least 1 day as a buffer will create a little bit of breathing room to make this less stressful for me. Because after all, I enjoy what I'm doing, but I have now turned it into a chore with no room for mistakes. A third reason you might be overcommitting is that you are underestimating the work. I know I did that. In my mind, keeping a blog was going to be easy. I just had to write 1 article a week. How hard can that be? I have a ton of ideas. I read all the time. I could write at least 1 article per week. But what I completely underestimated is that just writing a complete draft doesn't make it ready for publishing. I forgot all about editing, H1 tags, H2 tags, using WordPress and formatting it for WordPress, adding images, embedding videos, linking to different articles. There's so much more that goes into publishing an article or a blog post that I had completely disregarded in my calculations. So now I'm having to go back and reevaluate how long it really takes me to write a full article and get it to the point where I'm ready to publish it. And very similarly, recording 1 video a week is not the end of the world, but I work full time and I have a child and I have a husband and I have all these other commitments and I serve on a board and I participate in another group and I do all these things. When you take them each separately, everything is doable. When you add them all up together, then you look at a very, very full schedule where you don't have a lot of room to breathe. So yes, I can record 1 video per week. But again, I underestimated how much work goes into that. Yes, my editing is not top notch, but I still have to do some editing, cut out all the ums and all the times that I've repeated myself, and that takes a little bit of time. I have to put some kind of a thumbnail together, and before I record, I kind of have to map out my main talking points, otherwise I'll be rambling on forever. So there's a lot of work that goes into prepping to record, and then a lot of work that happens after you do just a raw recording of you talking to the camera. And I had completely underestimated all of that. So now again, I have to go back and re-estimate how long I actually spend per video and try to break that into smaller chunks that I can fit into different days throughout my week. Now, underestimating work is something that I don't think we can avoid 100%, because if you're doing something for the first time, you have to estimate how long it'll take. But the way you make your estimates better is that you treat them as an experiment. You go and you do it for a little bit, you learn how long it really takes in real life, and then you adjust your original plan, which is what I'm going through right now. And the last reason you might be overcommitting yourself is that you are planning with an ideal scenario in mind. Let me know in the comments if you can relate to this. But when I perform extremely well, I decide that this is the new standard for me moving forward. If I am able to do 16 things in one day, then every day moving forward, I want to be able to do 16 things. Using your best week or your best day as a benchmark moving forward is a trap. Some days you'll wake up feeling tired, you'll feel achy, maybe you'll feel under the weather, maybe something crazy will happen at work, maybe a family member will need your help, maybe something will come out of the blue that you didn't expect. And if your plans are based on you operating at 100% all the time, you are bound to fail. Because there are a lot of reasons outside of us that can prevent us from being at 100%. Also, planning your life at 100% means that you cannot be flexible. If anything goes wrong with your day, you are bound to fail. So instead, what I'm aiming for now is to operate at 85% of my capabilities and at 85% of my capacity. Because I find that when I try to overdo it, it always backfires. When I try to operate at 100%, I can only last a few days. And after this high productivity period, I usually crash for several more days. So if you really looked at an average of my performance level, it may be more like a 60% to maybe 75%. So there's no point in doing 100% of your best effort for 2 days if you will then spend a week and a half recovering from that and doing the bare minimum. A much better goal for me, I think at this point, is to aim for 80 to 85% of what I know is my absolute best and stop at that point, so that I always have a little bit of reserve left in case life throws a curveball at me, or I have a flare-up of Crohn's, or my kid gets sick, or something crazy happens at work and we have an urgent deadline. But giving yourself a little bit of breathing room so you're not performing super well and then crashing and going through these ups and downs repeatedly. And I also think it's just better for your mental health and your physical health if you can stay consistent at 80 to 85% rather than crashing and going up and spiking and crashing and spiking and crashing. As always, the things I talk about in my videos are meant for you, the audience, but they're mostly meant for me. This is the content that I feel like I need to rewatch periodically to set me straight. So the bottom line here is that you can burn yourself out while doing exactly the things you want to do. We don't always burn out just because other people are putting pressure on us. Sometimes we put the pressure on ourselves. All the things I've talked about in this video are things that I'm enjoying, that I would like to keep in my life, but I think I went a little too fast too soon. What I'm doing now, after a few months of trying all these things, is reflecting on my experience, teasing out some of the lessons I've learned, and using that information to adjust my original plan. I wrote a couple of pretty candid blog posts about this whole overcommitment and scope creep situation that I'm going through, and I will link those in the description box in case you want to read more about what happened.